What's up, guys? Welcome back to my channel. For those of you who are new here, my name is Jasmine, and today we're going to be doing a sit-down Q&A about the life of a flight attendant.
She's around, nothing else matters. If I don't, someone else will. Wanna love you, girl, wanna love you, girl, wanna love you, girl, wanna love you, wanna love you, girl, wanna love you, girl, wanna love you, girl, wanna love you.
I'm really excited about today's video, mostly because all of the questions that will be answered today are from questions that you guys asked in the comments below on some of my most recent videos, some of my super old videos. Anytime I ask questions, like ask y'all to ask me questions on Instagram, and nobody ever responds, so I was like, I'm asleep because I have this whole plethora of questions that are being asked of me in my YouTube comments that I haven't yet answered, so might as well compile them all together and create a video, and that's exactly what we're doing here today. So I'm ready to get started answering these questions for you guys, and before I do, you already know the drill. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Other than that, let's just get right into it. So it was just easier for me to pull the questions on YouTube and put them all on like a notes page, and I already categorized the questions. So I have a commuting section, training, getting the job, and then randoms. So those are the four categories that we'll be going through today. I'm gonna start out with the commuting section because that's like the most relevant. A lot of these questions were more recently asked, considering I just commuted and people have tons of questions surrounding that. So we're gonna get just right into it. Ain't no prelude, we're just jumping in. So the first couple of questions I feel like kind of go together. So one person asked, I'm confused, if you live in Atlanta and was once based there, how could they just move you to Boston? And another person asked, wait, I must have missed a vlog, are you no longer living in Atlanta, or do you commute for other reasons? And then someone else asked, why did you switch to Boston? So to me, that's all like one question. You guys are pretty much all asking the same thing. So first, I do still live in Atlanta. I chose to come to Boston for a number of reasons. One of those being my seniority is way better in Boston. Boston's a pretty junior base. And so with that, I can hold better, meaning when I bid every month for my schedule, I can hold the days off I want, I can hold holidays off, I can hold pretty much whatever trip I want, as long as it's like doesn't go too senior. That is pretty much why I came to Boston. And in the beginning, in September, I didn't have A-days when I originally transferred to Boston, which is on reserve on call days for my airline. We call them A-days. Being based in Boston at the time meant I had no A-days, but my company just did a really big base transfer, and with that, a lot of junior people left the base and went to other bases, and it dropped me down on the totem pole. And so starting in November, I have A-days now, so it kind of sucks, but it's okay because even regardless of still having A-days, I don't get used on my A-days really, and I can still hold my days off, hold holidays off, and hold the trips that I want. So it's still the same vibe, it's just an addition of A-days, which kind of sucks, but like I said, I'm working through it. I'm still a work in progress when it comes to having A-days in Boston, but I think that they will go away again soon. Another portion of that question is, how can they just move you to Boston? They didn't. Moving to Boston, or switching my base to Boston, was solely a personal choice of mine. No one like forced me to do it. No one forced me out of Atlanta to move bases. It's always a choice. The only time you'll ever be forced to go to a certain base is when you're fresh out of training, and that's only if your base choice was not granted to you. That is pretty much the gist of those questions. I'm no longer based in Atlanta. I still live in Atlanta, but I commute to Boston because my seniority is better in Boston. In a nutshell, that's the answer. Moving on to the next question, where do you stay if on reserve for 4 days? Do they discount rooms? This is a great question. Most times, so in this base, you aren't allowed to sleep in the lounge, but I mean, if worst comes to worst, then obviously you can rest your head in the lounge, but most times you will have to get a hotel. And if you're in between on-call days, like say you had standby on Monday and you didn't get used, and then you start a day 2 or your second day of reserve on Tuesday, that night, Monday night, you have to figure out where you stay. Like, you don't get a hotel, you don't, none of that. The company doesn't provide that for you. So it's always better if you don't live in base to just like preference a trip, try to bid a trip so that you can go to work. But if not, you'll pretty much be sitting around day to day, and you do have to get a hotel. The company does not discount hotel rooms or crash pads or anything of that sort. The only time the company pays for your hotel is on a layover, which is on a rotation. So there are options of discounted hotels, but that's if the hotel provides it. Sometimes the company will reach out to certain hotels around the airport and kind of negotiate a rate, what they call a crew rate, for flight attendants and pilots and stuff who are commuting or who need somewhere to stay. But again, that's solely up to the hotel company in itself. So yes, there are discounts, but in Boston specifically, and I can only speak for Boston and Atlanta, but I can really only speak for Boston when it comes to commuting, as far as like, it's really expensive, and although there is a discount, a crew rate, it's still $100 plus. So yeah, you won't be spending $300 a night on a hotel, but it would certainly be $100 a night for a room, and that's if you're on on call for 4 days, 4 to 6 days. That's a lot of money, you know, to be adding up, which is why I said earlier, it's always best to try to work something, try to get on a trip, try to preference something so that you're not like throwing money down the drain, paying for a hotel. Next question, are the trips better in Boston? Do they have A-days? So I kind of already answered half of this question. Yes, they have A-days here, but the A-days stop at a much higher seniority than they would in like Atlanta. Atlanta, you're guaranteed to have A-days all the way through like 12 to 15 years of being a flight attendant. But in Boston, for example, in September, A-days were cut at like what, like I knew people who were 6 months in, 6 to 8 months in, and didn't have A-days. The base that you're at really determines whether or not you're gonna have A-days or not. I did not have A-days when I first came to Boston, which is a big reason I came out to Boston. Are the trips better in Boston? Yes, in my opinion. Everything is opinion based, right? So it's the good thing about this career is that there's something for everybody. And the thing I like about Boston is their trip construction. Most of the flights are a lot longer, and you do less flights in a day than where, like, only thing I can really compare it to is Atlanta, because that's the only place I've ever also been based at. So that's the only comparison that I have. But in Atlanta, it would be a lot of up and down, shorter flights, 4 legs a day, like not really worth that much money. But in Boston, you do less flying but get paid more money. Like I can't really explain how it like makes sense, but like a lot of the distances are longer, a lot of the trip values are worth way more money. For example, you can see 18-hour, 19-hour credit trips on the board more frequently than you would in Atlanta. Atlanta, you'll see 16 hours, 15 hours. And that's, when I'm saying those hours, I'm meaning flight time hours. Now, it's still a 3-day, but this 3-day in Atlanta is only worth 16 flight pay hours versus the same type of 3-day, but like less legs, worth 19 hours in Boston because the flights are much longer. So I personally really like the flying in Boston. I like the type of trip that they have. I like going transcon. I like doing transcons where I'm going from Boston to the West Coast, because usually that's 1 leg a day, and then you get like 24-hour layovers. You do have a lot more longer layovers here in Boston. So I personally really like the flying in Boston. And yeah, I mean, that's really all I have to say about that one. The last question in this section is, do all flight attendants have to commute at first? No. So it depends when you come in. So I can speak on the year I came in 2019. I was E class, so they do it by letters, right? So A through Z, right? So classes A through G were offered all the bases pretty much, right? So you had any choice, and then you were more than likely able to get your first choice. But after G class of 2019, they completely closed Atlanta. So Atlanta wasn't even an option anymore for new hire flight attendants. So you you didn't have much of a choice but to pick a different base, which would ultimately make you a commuter if you lived in Atlanta. Now, this isn't the case for all new flight attendants. It just depends when you come on to training, right? So when you get hired and you get your CJO, a lot of the times your hire date or your training date is dependent on how fast you get all that paperwork in, you do your drug test and all that stuff. That is really dependent on you. So if you take longer to get all of your paperwork in, your training date will start a lot later. Or if you have a hiccup with a job, or I know some instances where people got offered a training date, but they were like, can I start training in two weeks later or 1 month later? But I'm telling you, that 2-week time frame could make or break whether or not you're a commuter or not. So because you could have started training this week and then the next week is when they cut off Atlanta, you know what I'm saying? So it's always best to start training as quickly as possible after you get your CJO, as quickly as possible that you can control. Most times you just can't control it. You just are in a later class, you got hired later in the year. There's just nothing you can do about that. So just keep that in mind, that commuting is a possibility, but it's not completely required for all new flight attendants. Moving right along to the next category, getting the job. I only have 4 questions here. The first question is, how long did the face-to-face last? Did it last the whole time? And I think that what they're asking is, like, did you speak to somebody the entire interview? And I don't really want to speak too much on the face-to-face interview because it really is an experience, and it's just something that I just don't want to spoil for anybody who ends up going. But just know you aren't sitting there talking to a person in an interview the entire time that you're there. There is a plethora of things that you're doing at the face-to-face interview, and speaking to someone face-to-face is only a portion of that interview. So recommendations to get hired for an aspiring flight attendant, and I'm going to go ahead and combine that with interview tips and tricks. Honestly, my biggest tips and tricks or recommendation would be to be 100% genuine. Be your most authentic self. Always just smile, always be warm-hearted and just welcoming to whoever comes your way. If you're in the interview, talk to everybody. Don't be closed off on just yourself. Stay active, stay up, stay smiling, speak loudly, speak clearly, project your voice and let people know, like, oh, I'm in the room when you start talking. And be 100% honest about the job and its requirements. I think one of the things that really helped me in my interview was that I was realistic about the requirements and the sacrifices that you make as a flight attendant. I expressed that I was very knowledgeable, that okay, I might miss Christmas for the first 5 years of my career. I might, I'm not going to be able to have my weekends off. And I was very clear about being okay with that. And I think that my knowledge around just the culture of the company I was applying for, and then the culture of the job itself. Also, it makes you credible to be someone who's not going to get the job and then quit later. You know what I'm saying? Like, no one wants a heavy turnover rate, right? We want people who are coming to the job and will accept and have good reliability. That's like super important. So just making sure that you know what whatever company you're applying for, know what they want, and then tailor your answers around that. But be genuine. Don't lie. Like, you know what I'm saying? Because anybody can read a liar. Like, it'll come through inevitably. Some people get by though, don't get me wrong. They get hired and then they on the line and I'm wondering, like, how the heck did they get hired? But that's not my business. But to me, that's the best advice I can give you. Like, there's tons of stuff I could probably say, but to me, that's like the most important. And then the last question in the category is, did you pay for university to put on your resume? I went to college, but I didn't like go to college to be a flight attendant. There is no crash course or certification that you can get to put on your resume to become a flight attendant. The best you can do is work jobs that you can tailor your job description and requirements to be like that of a flight attendant. So transportation jobs or childcare jobs or anything customer service, and talk about anything safety related, things like that. Like, really highlight those on your resume. But there's no university or anything crash course, college, anything that I put on to be a flight attendant. You actually don't even have to have any college experience or any time spent in college to become a flight attendant. There's no requirement for that. The main requirement is that you're 21 years old. So now if you want to move in throughout the company and stuff like that and go to different positions after you become a flight attendant, some of those jobs might require you to have a degree, but to become a flight attendant, there is no degree requirement. You just got to be 21. Next category is training. I had a few questions here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 questions under the training category. And the first question is training, how is training paid? Is it bi-weekly? When I went through training, the payment was bi-weekly. Can you live on campus if you live in the city? So there is a radius requirement. If you live more than 25 miles away from the headquarters, you are required to stay at the hotels. But if you live in a 25-mile radius, you are not, basically you're not allowed to have a hotel because you can commute in, you can drive in every day. There were instances when I was in training where there were people who did live close, but they found it to be a bit of a struggle to drive in every day, and they just needed more time to like focus and study and things like that. Depending on your circumstances and what you can tell them, they will accommodate you with a training room, a hotel room thing. I was not pressed to be in the hotel, sharing a hotel room with anybody, so I was very happy to have lived in a 25-mile radius. So I personally drove into work every day, but if you live outside of the 25-mile radius, it is required that you have a hotel room. Now, whether or not you sleep in there, that's your business, but they do give you a room if you are outside that 25-mile radius. How many pants and shirts did you have for training? Amy girl, you asked me this question like 7 months ago when you were about to start training, and now we've met in person and I've flown with you. So Amy, if you're watching this, my bad sis, but I'm gonna still answer your question for anybody else who might be preparing for training come January. So for me, I had maybe like 3 to 4 shirts and 3 to 4 pants that I just swapped out every single week. Honestly, you really don't need more than that. Or if you did 5 and 5, 1 for every day, wash your clothes on the weekend and recycle that every week, that's gonna be just fine. Honestly guys, don't put too much thought into your training clothes. I got my stuff from Goodwill, any like, you know, consignment, whatever. Like I straight up went to Goodwill and got white button-ups and black slacks, and I was straight, like I was good. And then at some point during training, they give you like a jacket. At my company, they give you a jacket. And so for most of the days, I wore the jacket over my shirts because I did have tattoos. And if I didn't want to wear a long sleeve shirt that day, I would wear a short sleeve shirt and then leave my jacket on all day. Are the tests always on what you learned that week? Are there midterms? And then the next question is, are the tests open book? So I'm gonna answer these together. No, the tests are not open book, so that's that answer. And the tests are typically always what you learned that week. So there are midterms and there are final exams which cover everything. The midterm will cover everything that you learned up until the midterm. But you have weekly tests during training, and they're always about what you learned that week. So that's a perk because everything's pretty much fresh. But yes, prepare yourself because there are midterms and there is a final exam. And I think that's it for training, for the training portion. And then I'm gonna jump to the random section, and then the video will pretty much be over. In the random category, I have, how do you cover your tattoo? Clothing. In training, I covered my tattoos with clothing. Even on pool day, I was fully clothed on pool day. I had socks on, long sleeve shirt, I mean everything. I was fully clothed during the pool day. I made sure that my tattoos were covered by clothes. I tried the makeup thing, but I just couldn't find a routine that didn't like smear or didn't like this is a pretty big tattoo, right? That's a lot of makeup and it's just a lot of time, and to me, I just rather wear the same uniform, the same type of uniform for my career than to have to worry about like makeup and all. It's just too much in my opinion. Now if you can find a good remedy, a good routine that doesn't smear and doesn't get on your clothes or get on your stuff, then great, do that. But me personally, how I covered my tattoos was always clothing. Long sleeve shirts, long socks, shoes that cover my tattoo, etc. How tall are you? Do you feel like shorter people have a disadvantage in this work environment? So I'm 5'3". There are times where I do have to get on my tippy toes to close overhead bins, but it's nothing too crazy like that. The overhead bin is the only situation that you'll run into in a height issue. Now, in your interview, there is, there's like a little height requirement thing where you have to reach up, and if you can touch this thing, okay, you're good to go. But if you can't touch the thing, you will more than likely be sent home. So unless you're like 4 foot, the overhead bin is the only situation that I can imagine that height is an issue. I don't think that you shorter people have a disadvantage in this job other than closing the overhead bin. Tights and shoe options for people with tattoos on their feet. So I have a huge tattoo on my foot, so big that I don't even bother covering it up. But I do have, there are times I did buy a dress, I did buy a uniform dress, and I got these tights called Capriccio. I'll put the link in the description box, but they look like skin, but they're opaque enough to cover your tattoos and stuff, and they do work, and they cover my tattoo. So I would offer that as an option. Other than that, I just wear the pantsuit pretty much. And so with the pantsuit, I wear black socks, and you can literally wear whatever shoe, because if you're wearing black socks, the socks are covering your feet. So that is pretty much what I do to cover my foot tattoo. But like I said, I'll link those tights in the description box below. You can get them on Amazon. They're like $15, and they are like the thick ballet tights. Do you have to have your passport for the first interview? No, you do not. You just need to have the only time you have to make sure you have your passport is by the first day of training. And so that brings me back to that answer of like, make sure you have all your P's and Q's, because you want to make sure that you can start training as soon as possible. If I'm not mistaken, your passport has to be in your possession by the first day of training, but not your interviews and stuff like that. So you definitely have a little bit of time, but regardless, get your passport. Why not? Travel the world. Are there maximum hours you can work in a month? I don't think that they cap the hours that you can work in a month. It's just a matter of legality and how much you're stacking your trips. So as long as you're getting legal rest in between your trips, you can work as much as you want. You can stack your trips back to back to back, as long as you are having those 24 hours in between, you know, your sign-ins or whatever the requirements are, whatever the legalities are for your airline. Or do you pack uniform items? I don't know why I let that be the last question, but it's such a random way to end the video. Yes, I do pack my uniform items, other uniform items. Sometimes I don't. Like my most recent trip, I didn't pack anything, any extra uniform items. So sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. If I feel jazzy and I want to switch up my uniform on a 3-day trip, cool. But I'm gonna be honest, I mostly, if I'm on a 3-day trip, I'll usually bring an extra outfit, but most times I'll just wear the same uniform because I don't know, it's just a little easier that way. But it's nice to have extra uniform items in your bag, just in case you spill something on your uniform, or your pants rip, or your shirt gets messed up. So yeah, sometimes I do, sometimes I don't pack uniform items. All right, I zoomed through that. I hope you guys are satisfied with the questions that I answered and my answers. I tried to be as straightforward and direct as possible with the answers. If you guys have more questions that I didn't answer here in this video, like I said, I did source it straight from my YouTube comments. So if there are other questions that do come in mind, don't hesitate to drop them in the comments below. You can also DM me on my other social media platforms, where I'm always active and things like that on there. You can drop some questions on those other social platforms for me as well, and I'll compile over time more questions and do another Q&A maybe in the future. But for now, this is what I got for you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed watching it. If you did and you got some of your own answers questioned, you got some of your own questions answered, don't forget to give the video a big thumbs up and subscribe to the channel, and I'll catch you guys in my next video, hopefully on Monday. But if not, you already know, Thursdays at 6 o'clock. I'll see you next time. Bye.